Here we are, and welcome to a successive episode of the Friday Night Movie Podcast, because we're bringing to you Shai and Lily, who have been, that's me, I'm Shai, and Lily, who have been
That's me.
the big Succession fans in the family. We are a few days out from the Succession finale, and our plan is to do a predictions episode. We love a predictions about the finale, and then we'll do
an appreciation episode.
Oh, yeah, an appreciation episode in general. This is our Succession episode. And then we'll do a quick reaction either next week or immediately after that episode next week. Lily, before we get into Succession, just because, it's a regular episode of the show, do you have anything to report to the family? I feel like a lot's happening. I'm not sure how many of these things should be said on the podcast.
I was a bit late to come to record today because my whole family has lice again. And
gross.
So I don't know what to say.
I think everyone just turned this podcast off.
I know. I was like, are there kids that are more susceptible to lice? And she's like, well, there's friendlier and less friendlier kids. That's it.
There's also just like the feral school you send your kids to.
No, it has nothing to do with like any of that. It has to just do like they're around. We live in a warm climate. So do you. Spring has sprung. They're out and about, and like kids that play like closely together, hug each other. But I mean, it's like they're at a Jewish school. They aren't exchanging kippas. I don't know. That's a good point, but I don't know.
Right? Like
maybe they're brushing each other's hair.
I definitely every time I go to synagogue,
but we keep having to pay a professional to get rid of them.
Every time I go to synagogue, well, she's obviously the one releasing them into the school first.
That's what someone in the school chat said. She's like, so who is responsible? Is it Big Pharma or that lice check lady who's just keeping this town under her thumb?
Just say, whenever I go to synagogue, I always forget a kippah. I always reach into that huge kippah bin and grab a kippah.
You guys all probably have lice and pinworm at your house, but just nobody checks.
No,
so I feel like Allie is very out of sight, out of mind. If I don't see the pinworm, we don't have the pinworm.
We definitely don't. And gross. Keep your buttworm to yourself and your
I don't have it. But
unclean family.
We did once have it.
So
I'm done with elementary school.
So I'm itching just by having this conversation with
terrible,
you.
But
it's terrible.
Everybody,
time to
do a lice check.
You let your kids grow that mane of hair out.
It has nothing to do with the length of hair either. I was confirmed by the expert today.
It just
I
makes
only
me
had to buy $500 worth of her shampoo. I didn't.
I don't know. I don't know if you remember in Super Troopers the scene when they arrest Farva and they put him in the shower and they delouse him, but they're just covering him in powdered sugar. It's a good bit. Okay.
Good bit. All right.
The other thing I would say is that, we talk a lot about our childhood and things like that. And one of my favorite stories ever to tell the kids in particular is how in Montreal in about 4th or 5th grade, Gaddy Tish, that's two separate names for the non-Jews, Gaddy and Tish. Gad being his actual first name, like the tribes in the Joseph Technicolor Dreamcoat. Gaddy came over to the house. Gaddy was a fun friend to have. He wasn't the only one to introduce me to wrestling, but he was one of the guys I watched wrestling with, and then we would play wrestling, which is mostly me just getting obliterated. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of rough sports. And Gaddy and I had gotten one of those Nerf footballs that all the cool kids had, where it was like neon on one side and black on the other side. So it was neon on the, I don't know. I don't know if this was the pink one or the green one, but I had one. And we used to play football, and we were playing football in the basement. And Gaddy, who had the best almost raspier voice than you did as a kid, I remember.
Hard to beat.
And Gaddy Tish says, "Go along." And or I'm going along. And I throw the ball and he catches it as he's running across the basement and smashes right through the wall.
Through the wall. Yeah.
Like not full cartoon outline of his body.
Well,
but definitely the outline of his
shoulder. Yeah. Shoulder back.
And I remember, I guess mom and dad were super busy, and this isn't the kind of thing you plan to fix. So Dad just took the Where the Wild Things Are reading is fundamental poster we
Which is
had
in Becky's house right now.
and just
Becky
pinned
has
it
it
up
there.
over the hole for years.
Yeah.
Years.
I mean, yeah.
Well, I was telling this story
To who?
to my kids. They think it's
Oh.
the funniest story. I think it's hilarious.
I
They
mean,
love
it is pretty funny that a friend ran through your wall. How old were you?
this. Probably 11 or 12. Anyways, I just they didn't believe this was a real person. They're like, "Come on, Dad. There's no Gaddy Tish." And so I looked him up on LinkedIn.
Someone from.
And I messaged him. And the first thing he referenced when I didn't message him. I just LinkedIn. The first thing he wrote was essentially, "Hi, Shai."
No. You send the screenshot that he has messaged you.
Right. I didn't even look at the message yet.
And I write, what did he write back? Like suspiciously. And Becky writes that he ran through your wall. And then he wrote back and he said, it's great to hear from you, something like that. And it's been a long time since we were running through walls, which adorable. Could not have been a greater, cooler validation for me in front of my kids. Right. Because right. Like I don't lie to them, but I definitely exaggerate stories. And so I was able to show them this message and proof. They were blown away. And you didn't have to be like, remember that time you were at my house? Yeah. We were playing football in the basement, which it was the first thing that came up. Yeah. And ironically, I went to high school with him for a few years. No, 1 year. Yeah. When you were at LCC. Anyway, so high school for 1 year. For all of the people who like our obscure Montreal stories, for all the Montrealers listening. All the people who have been in our basement in Montreal. Yeah, all of them in our basement in Montreal. Here's a shout out to Gaddy Tish and the legendary running through the wall story. Awesome. But fortunately, Mom and Dad didn't traumatize us as kids. So we have not ended up like the Roy siblings on Succession. And I think I want to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you. Okay, go ahead, please. Because I think that's a great point to start at. Because as people claim to hate these people more and more on this show, I find myself defending them 100%. And I don't think that it's the norm. I don't think we're the norm. No, we're the outliers. I was talking to someone the other day and I was like, "Oh, are you watching? Like, there's only a few episodes left." And they were like, "No, I can't watch a show where I hate people. I hate all the people. There's no redeeming people." And I'm like, I guess I see something you don't, or I guess I'm reading it differently, but I don't think it's exactly redeeming is the important part for me. Maybe it's true. They aren't anybody who's redeeming, but I have empathy, even if they're terrible people and they're extraordinarily privileged. I have an empathy for them because what's strung out through the whole show and which is brought to its absolute head in this season is the abuse of these children. And the trauma of these children and the neglect that these children, emotional neglect that these, all the privilege you want, these kids are messed up. And I would also say, there is genuine love between these siblings. The way they know how. And this season, spoiler alert, although everybody knows now, because Logan surprisingly dies in the third episode, they are left with each other. And one thing our parents have said since we were little, the opposite of Logan Roy. Right. You two must stick together. You three must stick together because we will not always be here to officiate everything. And you have to be there for each other and take care of each other. And I think on a certain level, they understand that too, because there is that deep loyalty between them. But you also see three siblings who are set up to compete against each other, who are denigrated in front of each other, all in different ways because of wherever they fit in the food chain and where they were in Logan's eyes. Each other, yeah. And you see the fallout from that. Right. And the irony is that because they do have that love, because I don't think they're wholly bad people. No, they're not. They're definitely not. I don't believe that. And I think you're missing the depth of the show if you just say these are rich snobs who are assholes ruining the country with their media empire. That it's so much more than that. And like, if that's not interesting to you, that's totally fine. I understand, sort of. But I think that like what is beyond that is where now the show gets interesting. And had what you really see this season is had they been raised in any sort of way where they were thought of each other not as someone to compete against, but as someone to bring into the fold more and actually be a team, which they almost attempt to do this season. But had they been able to accomplish it, the three together would make a phenomenal company or, you know, board or
At least they'd
head
be
of
able
the
to
board.
protect themselves.
Right. And they could do work, they could do brilliant work together because they each have a piece of, you know, what it takes to be successful like that at that level. But alas, it'll come down to like, I think the fact that they're damaged, they're very damaged people.
Yeah, we'll see. And it's not, and you know what's funny is people talk about the rich. For those three, it's definitely not about the money. It is entirely about achievement and proving their value.
Ambition,
and if anything,
being thought of as serious
people, which to me is one of the most haunting lines in like the history of television, when Logan says to them, "I love you, but you're not serious people," and that's basically the last thing he ever says.
That is pretty much the last thing.
And what's funny is I picked up on that line. The next day I told you, I'm like, "Ooh, I am haunted by this line."
Yeah.
And to me, it's the crux of what this is about. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have a way of finding your route to validation, whatever that is, or your self-worth or achievement,
like I would say,
contribution.
There's a great conversation between Shiv and Tom where he's like, no, give it all up. Yeah, like go ahead. Give up the money, the apartment, like give up everything. Come like over the homely side, the like, you know, sure. And she's like looking at him like, no, like give it up for love. And it's not like they'd be like cool with not having money. Like obviously they are used to, and what money means to them is success. So they're programmed to think that way.
Right.
These characters. But very rarely in the show.
But they could be rich. They could sell the company and be the richest people.
Oh, they could have walked away with billions just now. In the very first episode, they could have had billions and then go sit on a beach and be fine. Right. But they rarely talk about their clothes or their. Now I follow this account on Instagram
who
tracks their clothes,
right?
Which I find so fun because of how detail oriented the show is. They don't wear anything, like their clothing is to the nines, but you never see a brand ever.
Right.
And they're not like all Balenciaga and like you can see like all the Louis Vuittons
as opposed to Tom,
shit.
Who's always talking about money. As opposed
and watches to and this and that.
What's her name?
And then other rich people in real life who are out there hawking their shit on, you know, social media, and the money is everything.
Right. Or in billions, by contrast, another great show for the most part, where
the money is
talking about the money and what the money bought them is a thing. Like even if Axton like ultimately is about winning, him buying the $80 million house, like all those things that happen, there's so much discussion of riches.
Right.
And these guys just live in it. And there's like assumed a certain amount, but it also shows you that money cannot buy your validation and your happiness and all of those things. And then put on top of that, you have an abusive, insane father who
and
they
an
also
absent mother.
Well, yeah. I mean, the mom is totally odd.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into. Okay, so there's the biggest swing of probably any show ever was killing off Logan. Knowing this was the last season in episode 3.
Early on.
Which I thought, was genius because so many times they slip in a big change like that right at the end and you have to live in it for 2 episodes. Or right at the end he dies. Or right at the end. And
it was very well done. Or they'll do it in the first episode and then the whole season only becomes about that.
Right.
I like that there was a few episodes.
Right. They didn't
we got to have that conversation between him and the kids. And
so that was genius. Now, what was your favorite episode so far? In a season that I will say just overall, I think 9 episodes in, this is one of the most perfect seasons of television I've ever seen. Every word, every shot, every angle. I like
I will say that compared to other
every
seasons, it's
glance
not as
between them.
exciting. Like Jose was like, it seems just a little bit more boring. And I
Oh,
was
it's so
like,
funny. This is my favorite season.
and it still could be a favorite, and I love it. But it is true when there was like there's other seasons that have, oh my God, is he gonna fuck up like the board, the deal, like you're like on the edge of your seat. Oh God, you're like cringing for Kendall. This is a different kind of drama and a different kind of suspense this season. It's taken a shift, which is fine. I think it's a great way to end it, because if this whole season was about one deal, it'd be very like stupid to end the show on that. My favorite ep is the wake, when they are all like vultures huddled around the naming of the next temporary CEO. While the board
Oh.
meeting is happening, they
Oh, when
find
they
this
go into the
letter.
office and they go in the office and they find the letter.
The letter to me is such a phenomenal tool, because Frank wants to tell him right away. Carl is like, it could just get like flushed down the toilet. Jerry's like, I'm pretending you didn't just say that. Like, so like Jerry's like, no, there's limits, right? And then when Kendall finds out, it's like, it's so impactful to him. Then Shiv is like, but it kind of looks like it's crossed out, not underlined. Like, what the fuck, Shiv? Like, that's so brilliant. It's just, I find that the wake, and then when Shiv falls down the stairs, do you remember that Shiv trips down the stairs in that episode?
But to me, that's like classic, like how
like,
Shiv gets so close and blows it. Right? Each of them gets so close and blows it so many times.
Trips down like 2 stairs, and I was like, oh, I cannot even. Khan buys the house for $63 million from fucking Marsha, and then Carrie has a meltdown in the vestibule. Like, this to me,
Carrie's meltdown was amazing, and then you haven't seen her basically since.
No, and then Rome, like, has so much empathy for her. Rome feels so bad for her, and he's like, okay, let me get your number. I'm going to take care of you. I'm so sorry. Like, Marsha, that really wasn't necessary. Was any of this, like, he just feels so terrible for her. And he's been the nastiest to her. But and it all takes place in the walls of the original, like, Logan Roy apartment. And it ends with Kendall looking, and Rome looking at the desk.
Yeah.
And I love that episode. I love that episode.
So for me, the scene of the season is the "You're Not Serious" people. Like, that just going to haunt me forever. But
which is at a karaoke club.
Yeah, which is wild. But the death episode, it was so genius, with him on the plane and the back and forth and the gatekeeping and the reaction and the sequence in which they tell each other and Roman
Khan's wedding. It's all happening at Khan's wedding.
And the fact that it's happening at Khan's wedding, because like, just what else
on a boat.
Right? They're stuck on the boat and they're ruining to me. And like, I don't know a lot about camera movements, but wow, like everything about that episode to me was just amazing and unprecedented. What about your least favorite episode? It's hard in a season this perfect. Is there a least favorite episode?
Living Plus.
Oh my God, I loved Living Plus.
I love the content of the episode, but
when he makes I have seen in my lifetime, in my regular career,
stressed me out.
Not exactly the same
speech,
but people
like, what the fuck is happening here?
Demand a building of a set or something like that with so many hours to go, and then scrap the whole thing.
Episode, he was so. I need the clouds. He was so annoying. It's like prime Kendall.
Oh yeah.
Shut the fuck up, Kendall. Time like that. But yeah, I don't accept that that's the episode, I guess, where he realizes, or comes to the realization that he wants to keep the company and he's going to play with the numbers, and he starts fudging, trying to make it look like it, he could screw up the deal. I didn't find it like I don't know. They make some Living Plus jokes again a few times, but other than that, I didn't find that episode necessarily
all the ways they described Living Plus was so funny.
It was worth it for the gag, but if I had to pick one, that's the one that I was
for me, it was the retreat. Although the retreat, I get
when they go to Madsen's.
Like,
no, but that has one of the best scenes ever. When Shiv sits down with Madsen and she's like, "Yeah, but I think the evidence is that she has all your blood." Like
yeah.
finding out like how fucking
So
crazy Madsen is and sending his press officer, whatever.
right. So that
Bags of
is a
blood, like
thread,
this.
the Carolina versus the other press officer versus the
Eba.
Blood and Madsen. Maybe it'll never come back. Maybe it served its purpose already, but there's a lot in that episode. Other than the Greg Tom fallout, which really starts to crystallize there's a lot in that episode. Although I do love Madsen, and Alexander Skarsgård is just
I mean, he can do anything and he's brilliant, but I love the way that they ramp him up. Like he's not fully an interesting character.
I mean, all of these rich guys. Remember Adrian Brody in the previous scene?
Yeah.
Like the
That's
strange
such a great
things,
cameo.
the strange power moves they all do come to my,
and also paranoias.
Yeah.
And when Roman loses his mind and messes everything up, and he's just like
when he yells at
down. When he yells
no,
at
no, but in some ways that's like the best negotiation tech. It just makes Maxon want him more.
Yeah.
When he says, "We're not going to sell to you."
Right,
but
it's just sort of like I love it. Like I feel like the boys, even when they're fucking up, they can't fuck up. Like
or they
can't succeed. Like even somehow when they're trying to they could have it everything the way they wanted, they fuck up the deal that they don't want to happen. They've somehow made it worse. They fail upwards, the two of them constantly.
All right, let's get into predictions. Or should we do predictions after MVP?
Yeah, let's do predictions after because I don't have any.
Okay, MVP.
Me, it's Roman. It's Roman all the way.
Okay. I think that his character has been made. I watched it evolve this season. I was like, because they have to make you believe that any one of the three of them could take over, even though I don't think that's how it turns out. But they made Roman a more serious character in this season. He's still funny, but he's not messing around with his sexual scandals. He's not, he's had some big business moments where he thinks he could take over.
Right. And I think during election night, he is fully aware that he is the most ruthless and therefore the least moral and therefore the most like Logan, but he's not strategic. And so while he doesn't have the scruples and he doesn't have the moral compass,
right,
and he's the most like Logan of all three, he doesn't have the strategic mind to accompany it, and he ultimately messes up.
And Kendall always needs to validate his decisions as moral, even if they might be less moral. But that's a weakness of his because he's always. Right. And the reason
Logan, it's sad, but the reason he's so successful is that not only does he not have the moral compass, but he's also extraordinarily strategic. So he's got both sides working for him. Whereas Kendall will never get to where Logan is because he wants to do good. And he wants to do right by his family.
Right. Logan kind of knows what he's doing is wrong and makes his decisions
based on
Roman does not care. Roman does not care.
It's like Logan even more broken.
Yeah, exactly.
And he thinks, and I thought it was so fascinating about episode 9 in the funeral, the after the funeral part. I mean, that episode is so brilliant.
Yeah.
And one of the best scenes of TV I've ever seen is when the mom brings over Carrie to meet her Carrie and is like, Marsha, just sit the fuck down. Like, Marsha, enough. Just go sit. Like, I'm the original.
Wait, Marsha or the... Oh, yeah. I mean, Marsha is...
But she basically approaches Marsha and is like, stop being a fucking bitch. Like, I'm the original and y'all are Carries. So like, let's go sit together and be human beings.
So
and Marsha holds Carrie's hand.
All right. So who's your LVP?
Oh, my LVP is, I wrote it down because I have so many now in my mind that are running through.
Well, you wrote the Wolfpack.
Notes. Yeah, sorry. I was going to say, who did I write? Hugo, Carl. I'm very disappointed in Hugo's like a piece of shit, but Carl, Frank, and Jerry.
Kendall calls him his dog.
His dog, and he goes woof woof. There was something, when Jerry says to Roman, "It could have been you." Like, and I do believe that Jerry believes that had Roman
teamed up with her,
right, and had she been able to mentor him. That was even possible that they could have been great as a team. I don't think it would ever be. I don't think Roman's capable of it. But then I find it just so sad the way like these are the only sort of like uncles and aunt that these kids have, and I thought that once Logan was gone, they might.
The closest one to caring about them is Frank, because he has a thing for Kendall.
I hate him the least.
Well, yeah, he's a loser, but I
do hate him the least.
I appreciate also how they've been brought together and how they really are. It's them versus the siblings now.
Right. Whereas previously they often were competing with each other.
And they also could leave with absurd amounts of money and just not deal with this and not be legally implicated, right? They could walk away, all four of them.
They keep talking about their golden parachutes, but then none of them are willing to leave.
Right. It's fascinating. So my MVP are the Roy siblings. I'm just going to take all of them, including Khan. I think that, and then maybe that's because we're siblings and I have that empathy for them.
I saw an interview with Kieran Culligan and they asked him, who's the worst person on the show? Like, who's like the worst? And he was like, of all the people, all the bad things people have done, and he was like, oh, Connor, by far. And the interviewer was like, what do you mean? And
I actually think Connor has a sweetness about him.
But he's like, well, he's basically trapping a woman in a golden cage.
Oh yeah. I mean,
he's terrible. Like he is, and I don't entirely agree, because I do think that she chose to be there. She doesn't have to be there.
She 100% had
everything to do with it
on
too.
That
yeah.
one.
But
in fact,
I can't hate Connor.
I can't. But I also think part of it, maybe it comes back to he loves his family. The way he calls his dad Pop, like he stands for terrible things and he does terrible things. But I think when he's so hurt by them, I forget what it was around the wedding or whatever, when he's so hurt, like, you guys don't love me, or like, I think that like just makes me feel for him. And what's funny is the way you're framing this up, other than Rava, who I think is a unique, good person with the kids and everything like that.
She's like Kay in The Godfather.
Yeah, she is like Kay in The Godfather.
Yeah. All
of the spouses, like Marcia, Tom, what's the name of Connor's wife?
Willa.
Like, I think those people are like human barnacles. Right. They Marcia the most. Like, I really hate Marcia when she tries to insinuate her son and the way.
God, yeah, she's terrible.
And Tom is an amazing character. Let's not think, but
yeah,
he's an amazing
not a good
character.
Husband, but he's an amazing character.
He's an amazing character, but like and I think he actually does love Shiv he actually loves Shiv in a way she doesn't love him, but just the way he treats Greg, the way he's jockeying for position, like everything. And then Willa, probably, I don't know if I hate her the most or the least, because ultimately Willa, it's very clearly transactional. And
it is, and I love a great
Khan
scene
knows
at the
what
wake.
he's getting into, so in some ways they both know what they're getting into.
Right. But she supports him down this ridiculous campaign, and now when he's going to have to move to Slovenia, she's like, okay, like,
it's good for her.
You know, it's. But one of the best scenes also, and this again is at the wake, which is the best episode, is when Willa sees Marcia, and Marcia's like, what a long way you've come. And then she says, well, we both have.
Well, like, that's a reference to Marcia, where, Marcia's little bit of a backstory that she has.
Right. She's like, bitch, don't call me out.
I'm glad she is no longer a formidable villain. Like
to the kids. No, yeah.
Because
she's cut out.
She shouldn't be able to wield that power at a certain point. So I like where she's ended up. All right, predictions. We got it.
Okay. Predictions.
Okay, what happens?
I was worried that Roman was going to die at the end of episode 9. Like, he was going to get stabbed.
I believe,
like, Kingdom style, that like we aren't going to expect it, and he's stupid and going to get his comeuppance. And I was like, oh my God, please no.
Here's my big prediction. I think they haven't called back to it because it would be too obvious.
Oh God, what are you going to say?
And this is like bold. I think Kendall
is going to
kill himself. I think he's going to kill himself. Because remember that episode with the glass and him making the coup, and he goes up, but Logan like basically already knew he was going to try to kill himself, and so he puts the glass up so he can't kill himself. I think that is the gut punch for Logan, and I just don't think there's a world where Shiv or Roman, maybe Roman takes over. I actually think Matsson's whole play with Shiv about an American CEO is true, but it's going to be not one of the kids. It's going to be like someone like Stewie or Carl. Like it's going to be someone who is stabbing them in the back, but the kids will they'll end up with money, but they won't end up with the company. And I think Kendall could possibly kill himself. That's my big prediction. I think Roman was a fake out.
I think Roman was a fake out.
Oh, they're not going to kill anyone.
Right. Roman was a fake out. Right. Probably a red herring there. But I also wouldn't mind if it's that they do end up with the company and then they're left to sort of like, they get what they want, but now they have to make it like, we know that like what's coming for them is almost impossible to make this a success.
Also,
like, I don't know.
They still have Pierce. I mean, I don't think they.
Well, they never like signed that deal. I don't know. At that point, maybe that's the worst episode of this. Sorry, maybe that's the worst episode.
No, I loved it because it just showed you how stupid they are.
Well, there wouldn't be
when Kendall is talking about we're going to have
heard of Pierce
West
again.
Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. Like when he's talking about that news.
Oh, that's
station.
like some of the best lines about when they're.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of best lines, we're going to end on best lines. We're not going to do any additional Rex right now. Our whole last episode was Rex. From the list that you did an amazing list here, but for me, was he in a bit when they go to the mausoleum and they say, and Shiv says, which I didn't remember it was Shiv, because it's also so classic Logan. He gets it in a deal, right? Like he didn't buy it. Somebody like owed him something, so he took it from them. Was he in a bidding war with Stalin and Liberace? It was amazing, but that was made even better by the meme that I saw on Kveller. I think did you show it to me or someone else that said that the Jews reacted to this scene by saying, "What? Haven't buried him yet?
Haven't a funeral yet? What's going on?" But yeah, back to like the whole Pierce deal. One of my favorite lines is when he's talking about we'll have Sub-Saharan Africa and we'll have this and that, and Shiv goes, "That sounds like homework, the show." Like, no one's gonna watch your fucking
like
channel.
When you and Becky talk about my day job.
I also, one of my favorite things ever is when the beginning, when Carrie calls the kids, Roman's on the phone, and Carrie says, "Would you call him for his birthday?" And Roman's like, "No." And she's like, would you do a text? And he's like, only if he texts us first. And she said, well, that's only if he calls us first. And she's like, that's going to happen. I could do a text. And he's like, that's not going to happen. She's like, and so he's like, well, please. And Roman's like, no, fuck off. And he can go back. I think he says something like, now you can go back to like my dad's big omelet nipples or whatever. That line was that was a classic Rome. And there's not that many classic Romes in this, in the show, but, oh my God. And then when Kendall is like, and it's like, we're in so stressed. We're like crunch time. And he's on the plane and Shiv is like, and he's like, Shiv, we're death wrestling with ogres. And Shiv's like, you're reading documents is what you're doing again. Like, calm down. Like, you're just sitting there reading paperwork. Like, I love when she knocks him down a peg. Oh my God.
And then one more is we can get a funeral off the rack. We can do Reagan with a few tweaks from Kendall.
Yeah, that's Kendall.
All right. Lil.
Yes, there's so
any other predictions?
Oh no, sorry, I have to say one more.
What?
When Shiv talks about their mom walking into the funeral and she says, "Here she comes," I thought I could hear the sound of Dalmatians howling. So good.
All right, Lil, what can people follow you?
F&M Sisters on the Instagram.
You can follow me at Pancake for a Table, at Friday Night Movie on the socials, FridayNightMovie.com. Theme song by What Does It Eat, which is the only theme song that's better than the Succession theme song.
Yeah. Well,
but next episode, our reactions to the finale.
To the finale.
Love you for real.
Love you. Love
just
you
like
for real,
those
Seb.
Roy siblings love each other, but in like a way that isn't broken. I love you.
Right.
So talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Friday Night Movie, the sibling rivalry and pop culture podcast. Join the Friday Night Movie family by following at Friday Night Movie on all of the socials and visiting our website, FridayNightMovie.com. Our theme song is by What Does It Eat? And make sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.